There's a work called Seder Olam, and there are various midrashic collections, and every once in a while you'll find that kind of information in one of them. And so there are many people who just take that literally and assume it's the yahrzeit of so-and-so. And if you see a list of yahrzeits, it'll have it could have somebody who passed away 20 years ago. Like they'll have like a lists of yahrzeits of famous people. And so they'll have perhaps somebody who died, 15, 20 years ago, somebody died 100 years ago, and then they'll have like Reuven, son of Yaakov, based on that. So there's certainly some people who jump to take those things very literally and would include them in a yahrzeit board or things like that. But I feel that you would be best suited to notice it, and then if you see something else interesting that suddenly looks connected, then I would travel down that path, the kind of thing. That's what I would do with it. Okay. So far we have Liz and Lois. And if it's just Liz and Lois, that's fine. But Arona has joined you. So Liz, Lois and I were discussing your medical situation today. We consulted with each other.
Yes. Have you found the cure?
No, we wish you a full shlema, but my recollection and Lois's is that it's possible you could test positive for months afterwards. And doesn't mean that you have it. It just
means they say after 10 days, I'm not contagious anymore.
Right. But I remember even like traveling on the airplane, because you used to have to get this test. Remember during COVID, if you wanted to travel, they would sometimes make you get a test day of the flight or the day before the flight.
Yes.
And they would say that sometimes some of these tests can sometimes show positive for like 3 months afterwards. That doesn't mean that you
right. Up to 90 days, I've heard.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Okay, so we consulted on it, and we just wanted you. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. So this is Torah portion. This parsha is Shmos. We call it Shmos. I don't know when this changed. The tradition is to call the books after like the first significant word in the book. So Bereshis is the first word. Shmos is the second word. And then we call the book after these names, which even though it seems formulaic, there's still an assumption that the name is going to be important if you're trying to figure out the theme of the book or the point of the book of Chumash. But it wasn't always the case. And I don't know who switched it and why we're so comfortable that it got switched. But we're very comfortable that it got switched at some point. But it used to be, like if you look in the Gemara, it doesn't say Shmos or Bereshis. It has a name for each one of them. And sometimes you'll even see in the Rishonim, even in the early commentators, some of these people are writing in the 10, 11, 1200s that they also didn't refer to these as Bereshis, Shmos. They had names for these books. So the name for the Ramban, Nachmanides, says that this book is the book of Geula. It's the book of redemption. One time this is years ago, I was staying in Milwaukee at my father's house, my father and Judy's house. And I got up on Shabbos morning and he was learning with my brother, Yechiel, my older brother, who came over to learn with my father in the morning. And then my father turned to me and he challenged me, sum up the book of Shmos in one sentence. And I said, I can do better than that. Mm-hmm. So I added the word exile. So I added exile and redemption. But really, the book of Geula just means the book of redemption. The Maharal of Prague, these are, you see those little red books up there? So those are those little, on the top shelf, the tiny little red books. Those are the old version of Maharal. There were people in the olden days, like going back to when I was in yeshiva, who had that set. Those are Maharal of Prague. But there's this is what people tend to get now. This is so I don't remember how big the entire set is. Those 3 volumes, these 3 here are all one of these. These are the same thing, except that they're not the same thing, because what happened is Rabbi Yoshua Hartman, he went back and annotated and wrote notes on the bottom of this. So now, if you want to study Maharal, this is the one to study. Rabbi Hartman happens to be somebody I knew in yeshiva, and he was a student of many people, but he was a very close student of Moshe Shapiro. And a lot of the notes on the bottom, like a lot of times he quotes Moshe Shapiro on the bottom of these. So one of the stories, I have a friend, Rabbi Nissel, who who wrote and published a book on Moshe Shapiro, which came out in Israel last week or so. So eventually it's going to, eventually we're going to have access to that book. He mentions, one of the stories that he mentions there is that when Moshe Shapiro was to get engaged, so before he got engaged, his father-in-law, who was a noted Torah scholar, a Talmud Chacham, met him, and he tested. And so he told over the story. He said that he was telling this story. The father-in-law was telling this story to Reb Moshe's father. So he told the father, I tested him on all of Shas, and he knew everything. So then Reb Moshe's father said to him, you should know that as well as he knows Shas, he also knows the Maharal. He knows Maharal intimately, and it was always a big part of his teaching. He often drew from the teachings of the Maharal of Prague. The Maharal of Prague is 1600s in Prague. Jason's checking him up right now.
No, I'm just right.
Rabbi Yehuda Lowy. And he was the rabbi of the Altanaya Shul during one of its times. And he's often connected to the Golem, the stories of the Golem, which supposedly inspired or helped to inform Mary Shelley's Frankenstein eventually. But his gift was much more than giving us the stories of the Golem, the creating of a Golem. But these treatises on Jewish thought. So if you want to, for instance, let's say you're studying the Talmud and you come across Aggadic material, like let's say Jason was mentioning that earlier today, was Shimon, the son of Yaakov's Yortzeit. So he famously, if you want to have a doorway to the symbolic meaning, or let's say a doorway to the symbolic world that is available through that teaching, he is one of the primary people you go to, because that's where he spends his teaching. He's often in that place, which is sort of the meaning behind the text, or the once you've seen the pshat, now you want to go deeper. He's often one of the people that used to go deeper. In fact, if you were looking to prepare yourself as a primer for studying Kabbalah in the yeshiva world, nowadays people don't wait. You just jump right into it. You read Kabbalah for the layman or something like that, and you jump right into Kabbalah, and people are telling you ideas for Kabbalah. But in the yeshiva world, it's still not like that. And Kabbalah was this mysterious place that you didn't even know where the doorway was. You didn't know how to get in. I have this friend, Rabbi Gabriel Rubin. Tonight is a story of friends. So his name is Rabbi Gabriel Rubin, and he once sent me a short story that he wrote, which I've since told over and over and over. And it probably would cause him to cringe because I probably don't tell it over well. But the story is that there was an artist. And this artist was celebrated. He already had a worldwide reputation. He had many students at this point of his career. And word got out that he was working on something that he thought of as his life's greatest achievement. But it was very secretive. People, you didn't even know where it was, where he was working on it. It was very, very secretive. And then one day, word gets out that he's going to reveal it. He's going to show it to the public. It ends up, there's a building. And inside the building is this enormous painting. That's all that's there. One painting. That's what the building is designed for. There's lots of room for the public to gather, and there's this one painting. So the day arrives, doors open, and the public fill the gallery. And there's the painting. And people are looking at it from different perspectives, getting up close, standing back, and trying to take it in. And you end up with these different groups forming. There's one group who immediately love it and are inspired by it and are talking to each other about what they love about it. There's another group of people that think this must be a joke, that it's rubbish, that this is not art. I don't even know what this is. And you have all this kind of talking and stuff. And meanwhile, they don't. It's not known to the public, but this building was built with a viewing area, like behind, one-way mirrors, so that nobody knew this, but the artist, and he has students that are watching this. They're watching this unfold, and they can hear all the conversations, and they're just watching how everybody's responding to it. Unbeknownst to the people in the gallery, this painting is only really understood if you're sitting with the teacher and his students. They see, from the perspective that they're looking at, a kind of totality, and it's a kind of thing where you see this and you get it, from where they are. But there's no way to get that perspective in the gallery. You can only get that perspective from where they're looking. So they're watching this unfold, people grappling with this and giving their opinions, knowing full well that nobody could know fully because they can't get the perspective to really see the whole thing. And so they're just watching this, and a day passes and 2 days pass, and a big part of the whole exercise for the artist and the students is to see the interaction between people and art. And and this is a kind of conundrum that really would allow for you to explore this. And then suddenly there's a knock on the door. Now nobody knows this door except for them, the teacher and the student. Nobody would even know there is a door. And there's a knock on the door. And the students are like mystified and slightly horrified that there could be a knock at the door. And so the artist tells one of the students to go open the door. They open the door, and there's just this person standing there. There's this guy standing there. And everybody's sort of staring at him. He's staring at them. And the teacher, the artist, asks him if he can help him. Can I help you? And so this guy said, I came yesterday, and I tried to understand the painting, and I looked from every vantage point I could find, and I couldn't get it. So I came back today, and I figured there has to be another place to look for it. There must be another perspective. So I started looking for doorways. And then I happened to push on something, and it opened, and I went in, I followed the path, and that's how I ended up at the door. And then the artist said, I've been waiting for you. So there is a sense that when we live in our world, that part of our challenge is that we don't naturally have access to the perspective, that we are like the people in the gallery. We see what we see from this angle. We see what we see from that angle. We try to make sense of what we see. We try to project. We try to imagine. We try to do whatever we can in order to get to this bigger picture. But we are limited because we can't see from that perspective. So as we approach every midrash, every statement from the Zohar, every teaching from the Torah, every something that the Rambam says, every one of these things, they are doing their best to provide us with as much wisdom they have about what you can see from where we are, with the understanding that you're not going to get the complete picture. You're not going to get the great perspective where, just where you are, where I am. I'm not going to get it. That doesn't mean that there aren't doorways, and there are some people that just made that assumption early on and looking for doorways, and then they open up doors and they follow them along, and they get to these places of higher perspective. Even they recognize, even the world's opened up before them, they still recognize that they're only getting, some kind of limited perspective, but it's worlds, a magnitude greater than what they were seeing before. The Talmud at one point is talks about what you can learn and what you can't learn, and what you can teach and what you can't teach. There's areas of Torah that you should only teach to a couple people. There's areas of Torah you should only teach to one person, and even this person needs to be somebody who could deduce a lot or induce a lot, or figure out a lot of things on their own, so that you're just giving them hints. You're just giving them hints, and then they're taking your hints and they're going places. There's even a place that talks about how somebody shouldn't really explore these things unless you're 40 years old and married, and have children and have studied all the revealed Torah and all the halacha, and then only then should you study these other things. And then you read about people like the Vilna Gaon, Reb Chaim of Volozhin, who was one of the students of the Vilna Gaon. He writes that when the Vilna Gaon, before he was bar mitzvah, he wanted to make a golem. He wanted to make something using Sefer Yetzirah. He wasn't even bar mitzvah yet. He was going to use this book of, deep Kabbalah to make a golem, and then a shadow sort of passed over him, and then he realized, he got frightened, and he realized he shouldn't do it. And you hear these stories. The Arizal, I think he died. He wasn't even 40. I mean, he was like 39 when he died. Rabbi Isaac Luria, for which all those white books up there are just some of the teachings of Rabbi Isaac Luria through Reb Chaim Vital, and he died at 39. So clearly, they weren't listening to the thing that you have to be 40. He was 38. Okay, so apparently they weren't listening to this restriction that you be 38. So I've always imagined that this doorway would have a sign over it, do not enter. And if you're the kind of person that listens to signs that say do not enter, you won't enter. And if you are the kind of person that needs that perspective, you're going to enter, even if it says do not enter, because you need it. You absolutely need it. Remember one time there was a student at Or Sameach who was, we sat down together and he said to me, do you know Kabbalah? And I said, I might accidentally know something, but I don't know much. And he says, and then he goes through this whole thing to sort of test me. And he said, did you know that Abraham really killed Isaac? It wasn't that he almost killed Isaac. He actually killed Isaac. And there's also some clues to it in the text. And he starts telling me all the clues to it in the text. So I remember listening to the whole thing. And then afterwards going to a rabbi who used to just study and answer questions. His name was Rav Isby. And I said to him, did Avram really kill Yitzchak? And he said, what's wrong with the Medrash? I mean, the Medrash says, and Rashi quotes it, many of the commentaries quote it. They read the text that he did not, that he was about to kill him, and he didn't kill him. So I said, I know that's what they say, but did Avram kill Yitzchak? And he wouldn't go further. He wouldn't go further. Now, so there's like, afterwards I found, other references to it. They're all from mystical sources that talk about that Avram really killed Yitzchak. In mystical sources, there's no non-mystical sources that say that, but there's mystical sources that say it. And again, one of the things about mystical sources is they sort of play with you. They're not literal. They're often joking with you. They're often telling riddles, but they are clues to deeper things. So this is what I told students afterwards. If you have information from the Torah that is presented on the surface one way, and then you have the Zohar saying something else, so which one is literal? In other words, which one are you supposed to understand to be the way it was? And most likely the Zohar is not going to be literal because it often isn't. So if you have a choice between the two, so the way, if it ever comes up, the way I tell most students is that he did, in some ways he killed him, in some ways he didn't. And that's what the Zohar means when it says it killed him. And others, whatever, the Shlah and other sources that suggest that he really did kill him. Some ways he did, in some ways he didn't. And if you wanted to capture that, That would be a way to do it. You'd have kind of a right hand, left hand kind of approach. Rabbi David Foreman says about Midrash that it's like a pianist. A pianist plays the melody with his right hand, her right hand. She plays the melody with her right hand. And then there's a kind of, with the left hand, she's playing chords, which are a kind of harmony. And the combination creates this multi-dimensional experience. When we're whistling a tune, we're whistling the melody. But when you have both the right hand and the left hand, you have an experience of another order, a contrast, a harmony. So he used this to explain that Midrash is the left hand. If you listen to the left hand by itself, then oftentimes it doesn't even make sense. You don't understand why that's music. But together with the melody, and therefore he cautioned, you always have to read them together. You can't just live in one without the other. You have to see them both. Because it was written, the left hand was written with the right hand in mind. And so it's very important when you're learning a midrash to never leave the text, to always see it together with the text, because that's what they were doing. They were moved by what they saw in the text, and all sorts of doorways open, and they go down all sorts of tunnels, and now they're sharing some of the clues to how you could go down some of these tunnels. So they're sharing that with you, but you can't leave the verse. And this is a mistake that a lot of people make. There's collections of midrash that are just midrash, and are just the stories of the midrash, etc. And there's a lot of them here, starting with Shmos and Ba'era and Bo and Bashala and Yisro. This is where the midrash, these books, collections of midrash, live off of these Torah portions. They're just massive amounts of them. And the tendency is to just read them like they're a literature on their own. But they're not. They're always being taught with the verse in mind. It would be like the left hand without the right hand. So one of those people that was a kind of doorway, let's say you want to go there, you're looking. So where do I look? If you're in yeshiva, you talk to somebody like Rav Isby, he's not going to tell you. He's just going to look at you and smile. And Ramosha Shapiro, who it felt like he was telling us the secrets of the world, when we were young. One time a friend of mine was asking him about the number 40. What is the secret of the number 40? 40 years in the desert. Moshe's up on Sinai for 40 days. The flood is 40 days and 40 nights. What's the number 40? And Ramosha starts talking to him about it. Then he looks at him, slaps him on the face, and says, "Why am I talking to you about this? I can't talk to you about this." And that was the end of the conversation. Right. Now, but so now let's say you had one of those. So you went somewhere, or you just thought of it, like something struck you. Oftentimes these are like experiences like solving a lateral puzzle, you just, a thought comes into your head and you go, that might be the answer. And you have a good feeling that that's the answer, but you didn't get to it in the normal way. It can often happen with crosswords. Like you're doing a crossword, there's a clue, and you just put in the answer. And you're pretty sure about it. And if you ask yourself, like, why are you so sure? You can't even explain it, but you're pretty sure that that's the answer. So it's often like that. Like I have a friend, Harlan Loeb, my good friend Harlan Loeb, who compared it to one of those magic eye puzzles. I didn't do very well with magic eye puzzles, but every once in a while it would happen, but it was not reliable. You open the book to a page, you have to gaze at it in a certain way, like practically cross-eyed or something, I don't know what, and suddenly this hologram just jumps up, this 3D image. It's the coolest of experiences. So that's how he characterized it. This when you'd have a moment like that. And so you're reading the parsha, you're hearing something somebody said in a lecture, you're reading something on your own. You could be doing something else, and then suddenly, boom, it hits you. But now you want to know, what do I do with it? What do I do with it? Where do I go next? So the Maharal is often the place where you go next. He's often the one at the door of that place, and he'll welcome you in. But you're not going to get to the actual viewing room, but he is like the sage at the door to welcome in into that next place. Where do I look now that I've seen this? The problem is you want to just learn the Maharal, all the way through, and you do. That's what ends up happening, and you're not always reading it because you had one of those moments. And so, when you're reading something and you haven't had one of those moments, they don't necessarily strike you as important as they do once you've had that moment. And now you went there and somebody else knows all about it, and they're telling you more about it than you knew, more about your experience than you knew. And so they're sort of that person at the door. He's often that kind of commentary. So he wrote a work called Netzach Yisrael. That's what this is, one of 3 volumes of Netzach Yisrael. So Netzach Yisrael is about redemption. But he makes the point early on that before you can study, and he has another earlier work called Gvuras Hashem, and he makes the point that before you can understand the redemption, you have to understand exile. You won't be able to understand exile without understanding redemption, because redemption is the answer to exile. Redemption is the opposite end of exile. And sort of like what I was suggesting to you, that if you don't have the realization that there has to be more, you're not going to appreciate the more. I can sit here all day and say quotes and poetry about what the redemption is, but if I don't understand the need for redemption, if I don't understand exile, I'm not going to be ready for redemption. You can read the books. The books are all there. All the secrets of the Torah. They're all out there. There's tons of books about the secrets of the Torah. But if you read them, you're not going to feel like the world has just been opened up before you. Maybe you'll feel cool because you read some mystical stuff, but you're not going to get that perspective that you were hoping to get just from reading them, unless they are part of your quest, unless they are the answer to some place, unless you went somewhere and you realized you need this, and then somebody showed you what you needed. Unless that's where you are, that stuff doesn't matter. So why do we teach it? Why do we tell children midrashim, and why and why do we study mystical things? So my assumption is that the reason we do it is because if you have that moment, maybe they'll come to mind and you realize you had the clue the whole time, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, who always had the way to get back home, but she had to need to get back home before it mattered. What if you would have told Dorothy, like after week 1, that, you could go home, just, you got the slippers, just go home. So it wouldn't, the whole thing wouldn't have been what it needed to be for her. She couldn't know about those shoes until she was ready for those shoes. And it's the same. So it's the same kind of thing. So I hear a midrash about that. I heard this one. I grew up hearing this, and I grew up hearing that, or I heard somebody tell about it, and it sort of sits there with me. And then one day, the world aligns, and suddenly I understand why I need that midrash, and it's the key that unlocks the doorway to some deeper place that I'm supposed to go, some more profound perspective. But you until you need it, it doesn't feel like it. So you can learn Maharal, and you can learn a lot of there are other works that are considered. Ramosha Chaim Luzzatto is considered one of these kind of doorways towards the mystical world. It's not, in other words, Maharal and the Ramchal are not called Kabbalah. They're not Kabbalah, but they're like a doorway to Kabbalah. But if you're, again, but let's say you just picked up and read about it. It's not, it's not going to be anything if you picked up and read from pre-Eitz Chaim, from the Reb Chaim Vital's record of the teachings of Arizal. It's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to, I mean, again, besides feeling fuzzy and stuff, which a lot of times studying Kabbalah does. But when I'm at the place where I need it, suddenly it's everything. It's worlds and worlds of vision. So even though he calls it, like the Ramban calls it, the book of Geula, and it was referred to as the book of Geula, redemption, but in order to understand redemption, you really have to understand exile. And that's why this book starts with some details of the exile, a window into the suffering of the people that they were experiencing before describing the redemption that comes afterwards. Even though the point of this book, it could be said, is to talk about the redemption. And the redemption is important in and of its own right. It was the first of our redemptions from a situation of exile, but it's especially important because we find ourselves in these situations a lot and for thousands of years, in exile. And so understanding that there's going to be a redemption and what it looks like to have a redemption is hugely important to us when it comes to our worldview. But again, you can't get the depth or a sense of or a real view of what Geula means until you understand exile. So therefore, he wrote about in Gurus, he wrote about the exile, before he wrote about the nature of exile, before he wrote about the nature of redemption. And we have a discussion of exile before we have redemption. But it also could help explain, this is hard stuff. I don't know anything. I'm just talking, I'm just talking. Our souls are communicating. I don't know anything, but it's very likely that that's why he's waiting till a certain moment. God's waiting to hear the people call out to him. Why is he waiting for the people to call out to him? Why doesn't he do the redemption earlier? Because they can't have the redemption earlier. They need to get to a certain point. Otherwise, the redemption is not a response to anything. It won't be the redemption. It won't be the redemption. If we're not ready for it, if we're not open to it, if it's the thing that we need, then it won't be it. It can't be it. Yet, so there's all sorts of illustrations of this, and even in the TV series Kung Fu with David Carradine, you'll have like these masters that will wait patiently for the apprentice to finally understand something before they can teach them the next level. So they'll send them on treks and they'll have them do these these seemingly meaningless jobs and stuff like that, and because they need them to get it. Once they get it, then they can work with it. But if they're not going to get it, if they're not going to be open to it, if they're not going to ask the right question, like sometimes you'll see something where there'll be one of these stories, and then the person will say to their mentor, like, "Why didn't you tell me this before?" He said, "You never asked me." But part of you never asked me. It isn't like, oh my gosh, I should have asked him. I could have asked him this 10 years ago. No. There's a reason why you only thought to ask it now. You're only ready for it now. That's why you're getting it now. And it's like, you didn't ask me because you weren't ready for it. And so so the people cried out. And now Hashem is like entering the stage. God's entering the stage, and he's starting to manage things, and he's got Moshe doing this and that person doing that, and there's going to be this and that, and there's going to be plagues, there's going to be all this other kind of stuff and all this kind of drama, but it was all waiting for the people to cry out. Not because he's just needs to know that they suffered enough because they had to suffer because of something that happened before, or something like that. That's not the reason he needs to hear them cry out. It's like somebody saying, I was waiting for you to ask. But that's not a small thing. I was waiting for you to ask. It's not just a detail. It's not just a technical thing that is supposed to happen. Waiting for you to ask means that now you're ready for the quest. You're ready to go through the door. You wouldn't be ready to go through the door. If anything happened before, I could have told it to you. There's a student of mine, Moshe Chaim Gress, who had the candle shop in Tzfat. I don't know if you ever went to Tzfat and went to that candle shop. He can do magic with his hands. He can really paints, draws, and mold, sculpt, and all this kind of stuff. And so he told me he was working they had a tape library, used to call it a tape library. They taped all the teachers, Rabbi Gottlieb, Rabbi Cardozo, Rabbi Malevsky, they had all these teachers, and they would tape everyone. They'd tape every class of theirs, and then they make the tapes available. They were cassette tapes. Now, obviously, it's all digital. So it was a project. You had to make sure the tape recorder was there in front of the rabbi with the microphone, and then afterwards, you'd make copies of the tapes. So there was like a room for it, and there were volunteers. And so this guy worked the tape library, Moshe Chaim Gress, and there was a rabbi there, and this rabbi was working on something, pen and paper, and he had a sefer open, or pen and paper, scribbling, thinking, scribbling some more, thinking, and it went on for like a half an hour, and finally he goes, "That's it, amazing." So Moshe Chaim Gress says, "What is it? What is it?" Because he saw him working on it, and now that's it, it's amazing. And he goes, "Oh no, I'll show you what I started with. But you're going to have to do this because you will not appreciate it unless you went through what I had to go through in order to get to it." And again, not all of us go down the same path to get to it. Sometimes life experience has already made us ready for something and other things. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to start at Aleph Beis and it'll take 40 years before you're ready to learn the mysteries, because life offers all sorts of lessons that can open us up to the opportunity for these different perspectives. But they come when we're ready. If we're not ready, they're not going to come for us. They're just not going to. And you could have the book on your shelf for 20 years, and you could have read it 10 times, and it still won't have done what it did today when you looked at it because you weren't ready. And that thing about asking, don't underestimate the value of asking, the value of prayer in this whole thing. And that, bringing God into the process by asking him, about it, that also is a very, very helpful tool. All right. I'm very grateful for having this opportunity to learn together.
Thank you.
I look forward to doing it. I suggest we do it week. Yes, Lois.
Sorry. I get the lesson, I really do, but the Torah seems to tell us.
When you say that,
no, but, I actually really,
and
I think it's true. I think it's true. It's true. However, the Torah, even though
there's
people,
no however.
I'm talking about in the Torah. Okay, hold on a second. In the Torah, even though the people cry out, so supposedly they are at the point, and yet those people cannot be redeemed because of their experience. They weren't redeemed. They all die before redemption.
Why do you do that, Lois? It frustrates me when you do this. Do you think that thing that they all died is literal? Honestly, anybody who thinks that is literal,
they don't get in. Then they aren't the ones that fight.
They all leave. All the ones you're reading about.
So what? They leave and they want to go back. They complain. They're not ready. That's what that's what the Torah is telling us. They
No,
weren't.
that's not true. That's not true.
Okay.
The Torah is not telling you that. The Torah is telling you that they could have been ready. The Torah is telling you that this also depends on choices you make. You're going to have choices down the path. You're going to have, this is not just one thing that happens in your life. Now you're down this path. That is what I was suggesting before. You go to another level, then you go to another level, and you go to another level. Even the people that got into the land of Israel, was Mashiach there? Mashiach wasn't there. I mean, everybody, whatever that next level is, but even if somebody will say, it doesn't mean that you can't make the wrong choice. A person can make the wrong choice. At the Golden Calf, unless you're the Ishbitzer Rebbe, at the Golden Calf, they had a choice. At the Spies, they had a choice. That's Rabbi Soloveitchik's point about that space between the nuns in the Parshas Baaloscha. It's the road that could have been taken, but they chose a different road. They could have gotten into Israel within 2 years. And instead it took 40 years. Why did it take 40 years?
Yes.
Because of choices they made down the road. It's not
Rabbi,
supposed to be. Yeah.
Yes. I knew all that. I just like frustrating you. Okay.
You did. Do you want to know something about Lois? Lois was like one of the first people I taught 25 years ago. 25
She's
years
learned
ago.
Nothing.
1995. I came in to what do you call it when you're trying to get a job and you
interview,
audition or interview. Interview or
right.
audition. So I came in, they flew me in from Israel. I was planning on moving to America, and so I applied for this position at the Chicago Community College. So they flew me in from Israel to check it out. And so they wanted to see me teach. And so, like, the very first person practically that I met is Lois. So Lois has been annoying me since 1995.
And you love it.
And I do love it.
To change.
No, I need it. It has propelled me to whatever little I have learned.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
thank
be well.
you, Rabbi. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.